Summer 2024 has some great book releases coming up. There are so many great books coming out, but I'm going to highlight 20 today that I personally am looking forward to. Some of them are new releases and have already come out, some of them are yet upcoming releases, but all of these are ones that I personally am intrigued by. There are a handful of genres: historical fiction, sci-fi, fantasy, romance, nonfiction. I can't remember what all I have. And since I haven't read any of these yet and therefore can't really give a personal review, I'm just gonna read the descriptions from Goodreads. The first book that caught my eye is I Hope This Finds You Well by Natalie Sue. As far as Jolene is concerned, her interactions with her colleagues should start and end with her official duties as an admin for Super Shops Incorporated. Unfortunately, her irritating, incompetent coworkers don't seem to understand the importance of boundaries. Her secret to survival? She vents her grievances in petty email postscripts, then changes the text color to white so no one can see. That is, until one of her secret messages is exposed. Her punishment? Sensitivity training led by the suspiciously friendly HR guy, Cliff, and rigorous email restrictions. Goodreads has this labeled as contemporary fiction with romance as well, and it sounds like a fun plotline. I Hope This Finds You Well actually came out May 21st, so it is already available if this one grabs your fancy. Next is Long Island Compromise by Taffany Brodesser-Akner. This book is literary fiction / historical fiction. In 1980, a wealthy businessman named Carl Fletcher is kidnapped from his driveway in a cloistered town on the nicest part of Long Island, brutalized, and held for ransom. He is returned to his wife and kids less than a week later, only slightly worse for wear, and the family begins the hard work of moving on with their lives. They resume their prized places in the saga of the American dream, comforted in the realization that although their money may have been what endangered them, it is also what ensured their safety. But nearly 40 years later, when Carl's mother dies and the family comes home to mourn her, it becomes clear that perhaps nobody ever got over anything. Long Island Compromise comes out July 9th, so only a few more weeks. This next book comes out July 30th, The Wedding People by Alison Esbeck. This is contemporary fiction and romance. It's a beautiful day in Newport, Rhode Island, when Phoebe Stone arrives at the Grand Cornwall Inn wearing a green dress and gold heels, not a bag in sight, alone. She's immediately mistaken by everyone in the lobby for one of the wedding people, but she's actually the only guest at the Cornwall who isn't here for the big event. Phoebe is here because she's dreamt of coming for years. She hoped to shuck oysters and take sunset sails with her husband, only now she's here without him. Meanwhile, the bride has accounted for every detail and every possible disaster the weekend might yield, except for, well, Phoebe, which makes it that much more surprising when the women can't stop confiding in each other. In turns uproariously, absurdly funny, and devastatingly tender, Alison Esbeck's The Wedding People is a look at the winding paths we can take to places we never imagined, and the chance encounters it sometimes takes to reroute us. This book sounds like a fun plot. I love that it says uproariously and absurdly funny. That sounds intriguing, and it sounds like it will also have some powerful female friendship, which I always like in a book. This next book does not come out until August 20th, and that is By Any Other Name by Jodi Picoult. I have read a couple books by her and really liked them, so I'm excited for this one. In 1581, Emilia Bassano, like most young women of her day, is allowed no voice of her own. But as the Lord Chamberlain's mistress, she has access to all theatre in England and finds a way to bring her work to the stage secretly. And yet, creating some of the world's greatest dramatic masterpieces comes at great cost. By paying a man for the use of his name, she will write her own out of history. In the present, playwright Melina Green has just written a new work inspired by the life of her Elizabethan ancestor, Emilia Bassano. Although the challenges are different 400 years later, the playing field is still not level for women in theatre. Would Melina, like Emilia, be willing to forfeit her credit as author just for a chance to see her work performed? It sounds like it's going to be in kind of a dual narrative or dual point of view, which I don't tend to love, but her books always make me think, and I'm looking forward to it. Coming out June 18th, we have Middle of the Night by Riley Sager. This is a thriller. Riley Sager wrote one of my top reads from last year, so I am very much looking forward to this. The worst thing to ever happen on Hemlock Circle occurred in Ethan Marsh's backyard. One July night, 10-year-old Ethan and his best friend and neighbor Billy fell asleep in a tent set up on a manicured lawn in a quiet, quaint New Jersey cul-de-sac. In the morning, Ethan woke up alone. During the night, someone had sliced the tent open with a knife and taken Billy. He was never seen again. 30 years later, Ethan has reluctantly returned to his childhood home. Plagued by bad dreams and insomnia, he begins to notice strange things happening in the middle of the night. Someone seems to be roaming the cul-de-sac at odd hours, and signs of Billy's presence keeps appearing in Ethan's backyard. Is someone playing a cruel prank? Or has Billy, long thought to be dead, somehow returned to Hemlock Circle? The mysterious occurrences prompt Ethan to investigate what really happened that night, a quest that reunites him with former friends and neighbors and leads him into the woods that surround Hemlock Circle. Woods where Billy claimed monsters roamed and where a mysterious institute does clandestine research on a crumbling estate. This one does sound a little darker than most of my thrillers, so I'm giving myself permission to DNF, but I do want to try. This next book is also a thriller and also comes out June 18th, and that is The Midnight Feast by Lucy Foley. I've read a couple books by her, and they've been very hit or miss for me, but I still want to try this one. It's the opening night of the manor, and no expense, small or large, has been spared. The infinity pool sparkles, crystal pouches for guests' healing have been placed in the seaside cottages and woodland hutches. The Manor Mule cocktail, grapefruit, ginger, vodka, and a dash of CBD oil, is being poured at the heavy hand. Everyone is wearing linen. But under the burning midsummer sun, darkness stirs. Old friends and enemies circulate among the guests. Just outside the manor's immaculately kept grounds, an ancient forest bristles with secrets, and the Sunday morning of opening weekend, the local police are called. Something's not right with the guests. There's been a fire. A body's been discovered. It all began with a secret 15 years ago. Now the past has crashed the party, and it'll end in murder at the Midnight Feast. This sounds fun. Continuing with mystery thrillers and continuing with books being released on June 18th, we have The Nature of Disappearing by Kimmy Cunningham Grant. Evelyn doesn't let herself think about the past. How she and her best friend Janessa barely speak anymore. How Tyler, the man she thought was the love of her life, left her freezing and half dead on the side of the road 3 years ago. Her new life is simple and safe. She works as a fishing and hunting guide, spending her days in Idaho's endless woods and scenic rivers. She lives alone in her Airstream trailer, her closest friends a handsome and kind Forest Service ranger and the community's makeshift reverend who took her in at her lowest. But when Tyler shows up with the news that Janessa is missing, Emlyn is propelled back into the world she worked so hard to forget. Janessa, it turns out, has become a social media star, documenting her #vanlife adventures with her rugged survivalist boyfriend. But she hasn't posted lately, and when she does, it's from a completely different location than where her caption claims to be. In spite of their fractured history, Emlyn knows she might be the only one with the knowledge and tracking skills to save her friend, so she reluctantly teams up with Tyler. As the two trace Janessa's path through miles of wild country, Emlyn can't deny there's still chemistry crackling between them. But the deeper they press into the wilderness, the more she begins to suspect that a darker truth lies in the woods, and that Janessa isn't the only one in danger. June 18 is just a very popular day for new book releases, especially new thriller releases, because here's another one. What You Leave Behind by Wanda M. Morris. Dina Wood's life has fallen apart in the aftermath of losing her beloved mother, her marriage, and her prestigious job at an Atlanta law firm. She needs what the Geechee people of coastal Georgia call a day clean, a fresh start. She returns to her childhood home in Brunswick, Georgia to heal, but her return is anything but the respite she thought it might be. To make peace with all her loss, she often drives through the city. One day, she unwittingly finds herself on the oceanfront property of a loner widower who is fighting to keep land that has been in his family since the end of the Civil War. He threatens her and warns her to never return. But shortly after, he disappears, and his very expensive property is quickly put up for sale. Curious about what has happened to the man, Dina digs into his disappearance and finds a family legacy at risk. What starts out as a bit of curious snooping turns into a deadly game of illegal land grabs and property redevelopment in poor and rural communities with dark and powerful forces at work. Without realizing it, Dina finds herself caught up in a nightmarish scheme that threatens her community and her family. She'll need help and finds it in a close but unlikely source because she knows she must do whatever it takes to stop the sinister forces at play before she becomes their next target. Like Mother Like Daughter by Kimberly McCreight, this book comes out not on June 18th, surprisingly, but July 30th. When Cleo, a student at NYU, arrives late for dinner at her childhood home in Brooklyn, she finds food burning in the oven and no sign of her mother, Kat. Then Cleo discovers her mom's bloody shoe under the sofa. Something terrible has happened. But what? The polar opposite of Cleo, whose out-of-control emotions and unsafe behavior have created a seemingly unbridgeable rift between mother and daughter, Kat is the essence of Park Slope perfection. A happily married, successful corporate lawyer, or so Cleo thinks. Kat has been lying. She's not just a lawyer, she's her firm's fixer. She's damn good at it too. Growing up in a dangerous group home taught her how to think fast, stay calm under pressure, and recognize a real threat when she sees one. And in the days leading up her disappearance, Kat has become aware of multiple threats, demands for money from her unfaithful soon-to-be ex-husband, evidence that Cleo has slipped back into a relationship that's far riskier than she understands, and menacing anonymous messages from her past, all of which she's kept hidden from Cleo. This book sounds good because not only is it a thriller, which is one of my favorite genres, but also I'm excited to see how the mother-daughter relationship is and if there's more of a family plot focus as well. And for my last thriller for this list is a book that comes out July 9th, and that is Lenny Marks Gets Away with Murder by Karen Main. Lenny Marks is excellent at not having a life. She bikes home from work at exactly 4 p.m. each day, buys the same groceries for the same meals every week, and owns 36 copies of The Hobbit, currently arranged by height. The closest thing she has to a friendship is playing Scrabble against an imaginary Monica Geller while watching Friends reruns. And Lenny Marks is very, very good at not remembering what happened the day her mother and stepfather disappeared when she was still a child. The day a voice in the back of her mind started whispering, "You did this." Until a letter from the parole board arrives in the mail, and when her desperate attempts to ignore it fail, Lenny starts to unravel. As long-buried memories come to the surface, Lenny's careful routines fall apart. For the first time, she finds herself forced to connect with the community around her, and unexpected new relationships begin to bloom. Lenny Marks may finally get a life, but what if her past catches up to her first? Next is some fantasy, and this first book actually came out May 14th, so it's already available, and I just picked it up from the library yesterday. I'm super excited to dive in. And that is When Among Crows by Veronica Roth. She is the author of the Divergent series, which I loved back in the day when I read it. This is a fantasy novella. We bear the sword, and we bear the pain of the sword. Pain is Demeter's calling. His family is one in a long line of hunters who sacrifice their souls to slay monsters. Now he's tasked with a deadly mission: find the legendary witch Baba Yaga. To reach her, Demeter must ally with the ones he's sworn to kill. Pain is Ayla's inheritance. A fear-eating Zmora with little left to lose, Ayla awaits death from the curse she carries. When Demeter offers her a cure in exchange for her help, she has no choice but to agree. Together, they must fight against time and the wrath of the Chicago underworld. But Demeter's secrets and his true motives may be the thing that actually destroys them. And I apologize for my pronunciation. I will need to figure out how to pronounce some of these terms. The Night Ends with Fire by KX Song comes out July 2, and I am really excited about this one. The story is inspired by Mulan. Here's the description. The three kingdoms are at war, but Maylin's father refuses to answer the imperial draft. Trapped by his opium addiction, he plans to sell Maylin for her dowry. But when Maylin discovers her husband-to-be is another violent, ill-tempered man, she realizes that nothing will change for her unless she takes matters into her own hands. The very next day, she disguises herself as a boy and enlists in her father's place. In the army, Maylin's relentless hard work brings her recognition, friendship, and a growing closeness with Sky, a prince-turned-training partner. But has she simply exchanged one prison for another? As her kingdom barrels toward destruction, Maylin begins to have visions of a sea dragon spirit that offers her true power and freedom, but with a deadly price. With the future of the three kingdoms hanging in the balance, Maylin will need to decide whom to trust. Sky, who inspires her loyalty and love, the sea dragon spirit, who has his own murky agenda, or an infuriating enemy prince who makes her question everything she once knew about her kingdom and about her own heart. The Bright Sword by Lev Grossman comes out July 16. A gifted young knight named Colum arrives at Camelot to compete for a spot on the Round Table, only to find he's too late. The king died 2 weeks ago at the Battle of Camlan, leaving no heir, and only a handful of the knights of the Round Table survive. They aren't the heroes of legend like Lancelot or Gawain. They're the oddballs of the Round Tables from the edges of the stories, like Sir Palomides, the Saracen knight, and Sir Dagonet, Arthur's fool, who was knighted as a joke. They're joined by Nimue, who was Merlin's apprentice until she turned on him and buried him under a hill. Together, this ragtag fellowship will set out to rebuild Camelot in a world that has lost its balance. But Arthur's death has revealed Britain's fault lines. God has abandoned it, and the fairies and monsters and old gods are returning, led by Arthur's half-sister, Morgan Le Fay. Kingdoms are turning on each other, warlords are laying siege to Camelot, and rival factions are forming around the disgraced Lancelot and the fallen Queen Guinevere. It is up to Colum and his companions to reclaim Excalibur, solve the mysteries of this ruined world, and make it whole again. This is not my typical genre, but it actually sounds very intriguing to me. It's been a long time since I've read any sort of King Arthur stories or lore, so I think this could be fun. Next is Hera by Jennifer Saint, and this comes out August 13th. This is a Greek myth retelling. Hera, immortal goddess and daughter of the ancient Titan Kronos, helped her brother Zeus to overthrow their tyrannical father so they could rule the world. But as they establish their reign on Mount Olympus, Hera suspects that Zeus might be just as ruthless and cruel as their father was, and she begins to question her role at his side. She was born to rule, but does that mean perpetuating a cycle of violence and cruelty that has existed since the dawn of time? Will assuming her power mean that Hera loses herself, or can she find a way to forge a better world? Traditionally portrayed as a jealous wife, a wicked stepmother, and a victim-blaming instrument of the patriarchy, Hera is ripe for a retelling that shows her as a powerful queen, ruthless when she needs to be, but also compassionate, strategic, and ambitious. I've only read one Greek myth retelling so far, and this one sounds like it could be a good one. Next is The Stardust Grail by Yume Kitase. This is a science fiction book, which is not my typical genre, but I've kind of been wanting to try another one again. Save one world, doom her own. Maya Hoshimoto was once the best art thief in the galaxy. For 10 years, she returned stolen artifacts to alien civilizations until a disastrous job forced her into hiding. Now she just wants to enjoy a quiet life as a graduate student of anthropology, but she's haunted by persistent and disturbing visions of the future. Then an old friend comes to her with a job she can't refuse. Find a powerful object that could save an alien species from extinction. Except no one has seen it in living memory, and they aren't the only ones hunting for it. Maya sets out on a breakneck quest through a universe teeming with strange life and ancient ruins, but the farther she goes, the more her visions cast a dark shadow over her team of friends, new and old. Someone will betray her along the way. Worse yet, in choosing to save one species, she may condemn humanity and Earth itself. Stardust Grail comes out June 11th. Another science fiction, All This and More by Pang Shepard. This book comes out July 9th. I read one other book by this author, and it was actually a DNF for me, but I think it was a soft DNF, if I remember correctly. I might come back to that one day, but this one sounds interesting. From the critically acclaimed best-selling author comes an inventive new novel about a woman who wins the chance to rewrite every mistake she's ever made, and how far she'll go to find her elusive happily ever after. But there's a twist. The reader gets to decide what she does next to change her fate. One woman, endless options. Every choice has consequences. Meek, Play It Safe Marsh has just turned 45 and her life is in shambles. Her career is stagnant, her marriage has imploded, and her teenage daughter grows more distant by the day. Marsh is convinced she's missed her chance at everything: romance, professional fulfillment, and adventure, and is desperate for a do-over. She can't believe her luck when she's selected to be the star of the global sensation All This and More, a show that uses quantum technology to allow contestants the chance to revise their pasts and change their present lives. It's Marsh's only shot to seize her dreams, and she's determined to get it right this time. But even as she rises to become a famous lawyer, gets back together with her high school sweetheart, and travels the world, she begins to worry that All This and More's promises might be too good to be true. Because while the technology is amazing, something seems a bit off. Can Marsh really make her life everything she wants it to be? And is it worth it? I read that this book is kind of like an adult choose-your-own-adventure story, and I loved those books as a kid, so of course I'm very curious about this one. On to some romance. This first one actually came out May 14th, so it's already available, and this is the newest Christina Lauren book, The Paradise Problem. Anna Green thought she was marrying Liam Weston for access to subsidized family housing while at UCLA. She also thought she'd signed divorce papers and the graduation caps were tossed, and they both went on their merry ways. 3 years later, Anna is a starving artist living paycheck to paycheck, while West is a Stanford professor. He may be one of 4 heirs to the Weston Foods conglomerate, but he has little interest in working for the heartless corporation his family built from the ground up. He is interested, however, in his $100 million inheritance. There's just one catch. Due to an antiquated clause in his grandfather's will, Liam won't see a penny until he's been happily married for 5 years. Just when Liam thinks he's in the home stretch, pressure mounts from his family to see this mysterious spouse, and he has no choice but to turn to the one person he's afraid to introduce to his 1%er parents, his unpolished, not-so-ex-wife. But in the presence of his family, Liam's fears quickly shift from whether the feisty, foul-mouthed, paint-splattered Anna can play the part to whether the toxic world of wealth will corrupt someone as pure of heart as a surprisingly grounded and loyal wife. Liam will have to ask himself if the price tag on his flimsy cover story is worth losing true love that sprouted from a lie. This sounds like it's going to have some element of the fake dating trope, which I enjoy sometimes. A novel love story by Ashley Poston comes out June 25th. Eileen Merriweather loves to get lost in a good happily ever after. The fictional kind anyway, because at least imaginary men don't leave you at the altar. She feels safe in a book, at home. Which might be why she's so set on going to her annual book club retreat this year. She needs good friends, cheap wine, and grand romantic gestures, no matter what. But when her car unexpectedly breaks down on the way, she finds herself stranded in a quaint town that feels like it's right out of a novel. Because it is. This place can't be real, and yet she's here. In Eloroton, the town of her favorite romance series, where the candy store's honey taffy is always sweet, the local bar's burgers are always a little burnt, and rain always comes in the afternoon. It feels like home. It's perfect. And perfectly frozen, trapped in the late author's last unfinished story. Elsie is sure that's why she must be here, to help bring the town to its storybook ending. Except there's a character in Eloroton that she can't place. A grumpy bookstore owner with mint green eyes, an irritatingly sexy mouth, and impeccable taste in novels, and he does not want her finishing this book. which is a problem because Elsie is beginning to think the town's happily ever after might just be intertwined with her own. This sounds like a super unique concept, and I love books about books, so this could end up being a really fun read. Now for some young adult novels. This first one comes out June 18th, and it's called Of Jade and Dragons by Amber Chen. 18-year-old Ai Wei-ying dreams of becoming a world-class engineer like her father, but after a sudden murder, her life falls apart. Left with only a journal of her father's engineering secrets and a jade pendant snatched from the assassin, a heartbroken Ying follows the trail to the capital and the prestigious Engineers Guild, a place that harbors her father's hidden past, determined to discover why anyone would threaten a man who ultimately chose a quiet life over fame and fortune. Disguised as her brother, Ying manages to infiltrate the guild's male-only apprenticeship trial with the help of an unlikely ally, Aoyaki Yi Yang, the taciturn 8th Prince of the High Command. With her father's renown placing a target firmly on her back, Ying must stay one step ahead of her fellow competitors, the jealous guild masters, and the killer still hunting for her father's journal. Complicating everything is her increasingly tangled relationship with the prince, who may have mysterious plans of his own. The secrets concealed within the guild can be as deadly as the weapons they build, and with her life and the future of her homeland at stake, Ying doesn't know who to trust. Can she avenge her father even if it means going against everything he stood for? Or will she be next in the mastermind's line of fire? Such Charming Liars by Karen M. McManus. This book comes out July 30th and is a mystery young adult. For all of Kat's life, it's just been her and her mother, Jamie, except for the 48 hours when Jamie was married and Kat had a stepbrother, Liam. That all ended in an epic divorce, and Kat and Liam haven't spoken since. Now Jamie is a jewel thief trying to go straight, but she has one last job at billionaire Ross Sutherland's birthday party, and Kat has figured out a way to tag along. What Kat doesn't know, though, is that there are 2 surprise guests at the dazzling Sutherland compound that weekend, the last 2 people she wants to run into, Liam and his father, a serial scammer who has his sights set on Ross Sutherland's youngest daughter. Kat and Liam are on a collision course to disaster, and when a Sutherland dies, they realize they might actually be in the killer's crosshairs themselves. Somehow Kat and Liam are the new targets, and they can't trust anyone, except each other. Or can they? Because if there's one thing both Kat and Liam know, it's how to lie. They learn from the best. And for my last section, nonfiction. Cue the Sun, The Invention of Reality TV by Emily Nussbaum. This book comes out June 25th. Who invented reality TV? The world's most dangerous pop culture genre, and why can't we look away from it? In this revelatory, deeply reported account of the rise of dirty documentary, Emily Nussbaum unearths the surprising origin story of the genre that ate the world, as told through the lively voices of the people who created it. At once gimlet-eyed and empathetic, Cue the Sun explores the morally charged, funny, and sometimes tragic consequences of the hunt for something real inside something fake. I have always been somewhat intrigued by some reality shows. I really have enjoyed game shows, The Amazing Race, and a few other types of things. And also in more recent years, especially with things like the scandals with the Duggars and all sorts of other things coming to light about kind of the dark reality of a lot of reality shows. I just said reality twice. I'm very intrigued by this book, and I'm looking forward to learning more. Women in the Valley of the Kings by Kathleen Shepard comes out July 16. The history of Egyptology is often told as yet one more grand narrative of powerful men striving to seize the day and the precious artifacts for their competing homelands. But that is only half of the story. During the golden age of exploration, there were women working, exploring, and traveling long before Howard Carter discovered the tomb of King Tut. Before men even conceived of claiming the story for themselves, women were working in Egypt to lay the groundwork for all future exploration. I always love reading stories of women throughout history, and especially things like this, where it's so often we have heard of Howard Carter if we're into archaeology type stuff, but no one ever talks about the women behind it, so this will be very interesting. So that was a lot of books, but there are so many good ones either recently released or about to come out that I am very excited for. I already got in line for several of these at my library, and I will keep checking back to see which ones my library adds so that I can get to these books eventually. Let me know if any of these have made your summer TBR list, which one of these sound interesting, or if there are other new releases coming up that did not make my list that you're looking forward to. And until next time, happy reading.